that scared you, because we are entering the age of anxiety. I had to stop it. I went back and made sure those first 10 seconds were not like the most terrifying thing. I wouldn't want you to have to pee your pants. So I watched it and I didn't pee mine, so I think it'll be good. Anyway, we finished World War One. We've had the Russian Revolution. Ugh. I mean, it's just not very good. And it's going to create across Europe what we call the age of anxiety, where we're looking here not at any political stuff, and honestly, not much social stuff either. We're looking at culture, intellectual belief, the arts, and how they reflect that anxiety that grows across Europe. So we're going to look to see what effect World War I is going to have in creating that anxiety through philosophy, science, literature, and the arts. So, I mean, this is your picture of Europe post-World War I. This is probably someplace, I would say maybe in the French countryside, maybe down in Austria, somewhere in Russia, but you have just total destruction. And we've seen the numbers, right? 10 million men died, 10 million other casualties, and a sense of why did any of this happen? So you start to see scenes like this, and you also see scenes like this, where basically Europe is burying a whole generation of young men. Again, 10 million men die in the course of World War I. Obviously not all by bullet, but when you talk about disease, and you talk about exposure, and you talk about injuries, and various things, that World War I creates what's called a lost generation throughout Europe. And the loss of so many people, and for an unclear purpose. Again, if you're France, why were you fighting this war? If you're Germany, why were you fighting this war? It creates disillusionment, it creates cynicism, and it creates the idea that maybe humanity is not getting it, that maybe Western society isn't learning from its mistakes, because basically that Enlightenment belief that we are progressing had carried from the mid-1700s to the early 1900s, or the Belle Epoque and the Second Industrial Revolution. But now, after this war, we start to question whether or not that's happening, because before World War I, everything's looking great. Progress, optimism, rationality. Now that starts to change a little bit with Freud in the late 1800s, but you see like we're getting better, and that's very Enlightenment-based ideas, these three things, right? But after World War I, we see the spread of doubt and pessimism, and that are we really getting it? Is this really making life better, what we're doing with our society? And then irrationality, right? We fought World War I over a politician being shot in the Balkans. I mean, that's a tragic event, but does it need to balloon to what it ballooned to? So the Great War produced many questions afterward, and those questions basically created this anxiety of people not knowing what the answers are, right? I mean, a lot of you, on your test, you'll get a question that you don't know the answer. That creates the anxiety inside of you. Well, Europeans, they don't know the answers. Why did we fight this war? And was it worth it? And was it worth the 10 million? We don't know the answer, and that creates this anxiety. So someone whose ideas were around before World War I, but they become much more popular after World War I because of where we go to, is Friedrich Nietzsche. And Nietzsche is a German philosopher who's basically going to represent this shift, right? With the arrows that we looked at. Like Nietzsche is kind of that midline where we see a change. So you can kind of put this guy in with Freud a little bit. So he represents the shift in modern philosophy. And we go from a rational interpretation of nature and human society to the irrational and perhaps beyond. We go from the rational interpretation to the irrational and the impulse, plus the idea, this is key for Nietzsche, that conflict and struggle leads to progress. So he believes, we're irrational, but when we struggle, when we have conflict, that's going to lead to the stronger being better. So the strong will come out of that. So social Darwinism also a little bit here with Nietzsche. So what were his ideas? Well, he's not friendly to religion. God is dead to the modern man. He saw the technological improvements of the Second Industrial Revolution, the steel, the electricity especially, and the oil production, and what am I forgetting? The chemicals, right? And he said, you know what? We have progressed to the point we don't need God, right? We're creating our own life, basically, from all of these new inventions, and we don't need it. So it's kind of very anti-religious belief there. God is dead to modern man. Again, Enlightenment figures they believed in God, a passive God, one not involved in daily life. But now Nietzsche's taking it a step up, saying, "Hey, God's done, right? We don't need him at all. He's gone." And he also believed that Christianity glorified weakness, and kind of the key tenet of Christianity is admitting your weakness, right? And you can't do it on your own. And Nietzsche's like, well, there it is, right? I mean, you're just basically saying that you're weak. And he believed that the only hope and the only thing that could solve the problems would be a powerful person. That one person alone could fix it. That one person could come along and say, you know what? We've got problems, follow my direction, and we'll fix it. And to be fair, there's a lot of politicians that do this today. But kind of the context of the time and where we're going, there's a certain German who's going to love Nietzsche's ideas, who are going to jump on top of that. I'm not comparing Adolf Hitler to modern politicians with their belief that they provide the answers and they can fix something. But Nietzsche's belief is that you would have Übermenschen, Superman, that would rise up and reorder society, and certainly Hitler and some others would in the 30s and 40s would take ownership of that idea. So he also would say, Nietzsche, to be your own person, don't repress who you are. So individualism in the face of social conventions and social norms, he says, hey, don't repress yourself. So that's a little, again, I watch Moana and I'm like, oh, Nietzsche, okay, so I don't know if that's supposed to happen. But anyway, so you got Nietzsche, right? And then we're going to take it even a step up and see a movement called existentialism develop. And this is really going to flourish after World War II. So, World War I's sucky enough. World War II takes it to another level in many ways, and that creates the belief of existentialism. And the writer Jean-Paul Sartre, who is a French intellectual, that basically says, hey, life's absurd. There's no meaning. There's no purpose, right? There's no, connective tissue that brings us together in life, that we're mistakes. It's all a mess. Nothing matters. And the only way that we can get something that matters is if we create our own purpose. Because, look, 30 years have passed and we've had 2 world wars that have decimated a continent so that it will never be the same again. So who cares? And Sartre's idea of existentialism grows because people find validity in that idea that nothing matters. And that if you're going to find meaning, you got to create your own. So we get subjectivity, right? Interpretive behavior growing from the late 19th century and flourishing in the 20th century. But of course, if you do that, you can have people coming from different perspectives all the time. And we shouldn't be surprised when conflict happens because there's nothing that brings us together. So that's a little philosophy. Let's go on to science now. It's just depressing usually anyway. We talked about this with trench warfare, right? Technology and the new machinery. Technology may not bring progress, and it might bring more destruction. And we looked at, those new technologies in World War I, and we mentioned that was such a change from the Second Industrial Revolution, which was science is awesome, right? Positivism says science can bring understanding and knowledge, and that it's something that we should invest our time and faith in, some would say. But now, the 20th century, people are like, it also can make things really bad. And the nuclear weapons at the end of World War II certainly validate that. You also have a scientist named Werner Heisenberg, which if you've ever watched, there he is. If you've ever watched Breaking Bad, you'll know a little bit about this guy. But Heisenberg is a chemist who also had a belief, it's called the principle of uncertainty, which said that basically that it's impossible, if you look at the science, it's impossible to predict the behavior of individual electrons. You're just not going to be able to predict how people, or not people, but electrons behave. Now, if we extrapolate that to the bigger picture, you don't know how people are going to behave, right? Forget electrons. Let's talk about individuals. And if there's no constant behavioral patterns, we just don't know what's going to happen. So you can't predict how people will react. So we can take Heisenberg's scientific belief and kind of connect it. And if you don't know how people are going to react, aren't you anxious, right? I mean, if you can't predict someone's behavior, I'm this way. If I don't know who you're going to be or how you're going to react, it's going to make me anxious. So that principle of uncertainty is a scientific belief, but also we can apply it to social statements. People write books and they're depressing. these post-war literature, that they're going to challenge the accepted beliefs of Western supremacy. So now people start to question, what is Europe and America really the dominant society? As we all assumed it was before World War I, with social Darwinism and white man's burden and all those imperialistic ideas. You've got a guy named Oswald Spengler who writes The Decline of the West. Western civilization is dying, in his words, about to be dominated by, quote, the yellow race, which of course is an off-color, excuse the pun there, but an off-color allusion to Asian societies, probably particularly China, but also Japan. So I don't know. I mean, that's certainly something that after World War II certainly looks more relevant after Europe punches itself in the face once more. And I think Spengler wrote it after World War I, but I may be wrong there. You also have Franz Kafka, who's a bucket of laughs, let me tell you. There's Kafka, kind of looks like Paul Ryan, but anyway, Kafka writes all these books about basically helpless people battling hostile surreal forces. And I want to say there's a book. Sorry, I had a tech issue there. I did some research. I wanted to remember the Kafka book. And so there's a book that Kafka writes called Metamorphosis, where like a man wakes up as like a giant beetle, which sounds like a fun time, right? But it's basically like all these books. Kafka is kind of a synonym of something for you fighting a war that you really cannot win, or a battle you cannot win. If I wake up as a beetle one day, I don't think I'm going to win that battle. So in any case, let's move on. Oh, this is fun. Art. Okay, love it. Salvador Dali, always a bucket of laughs. He's on the wall in the room, right? You can find his face with his pet ocelot there. So anyway, arts of the early 20th century. Experimentation, self-expression, subjectivity. Hang on. We're about to go on an LSD trip. It's going to be fun. This isn't LSD yet. So you have the Bauhaus movement, which is very modern. It's a German movement. The lead architect in this movement, his name is Walter Gropius, not Scropius, Gropius. Shout out for certain people who understand that joke. But anyway, it's a German movement, which is very modern, very showy, and it's a new interpretive way to take architecture. So I'm not really going to talk more about that because I don't really know much about architecture. Anyway, painting, Cubism. Of course, Picasso. Picasso is the major form here, or the major artist in this movement. And I mean, listen, we were only a couple years back, we were painting water lilies and liberty leading the people and the Mona Lisa, but now what the heck's going on here? So Cubism it's getting into the subjectivity, it's getting into the interpretation, and the interpretation. It is an anxiety filled, right? I mean, we don't really see life as it is here. Something is terrible being created. The painting at the bottom is called Guernica, Guernica, and it's a painting of a bombing in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, which we will talk about next unit. So Guernica by Picasso, very famous painting. This is Dada, which is I love. It's fantastic. Dada art, Marcel Duchamp. It literally means nonsense art. So Duchamp, who is spelled Duchamp, French artist who creates just these nonsense collages, a urinal. This is his most famous, the LHOOQ. This is basically the Mona Lisa with a little goatee and mustache, right? Fun, doesn't make sense. Exactly, that's why, right? Because of the age of anxiety. You look at this painting, you're like, ooh, it gives me anxiety to look at. Surrealism, dream art. Salvador Dali, the most famous. It's persistence of memory there at the bottom left, the clocks, the melting clocks, persistence of memory. And then some of these others, it's just like, what? Let me just take you on a little ride. I love this painting here with the butterflies. It's very nice. It's just, I mean, there's just a lot happening here. Just, I don't know. The giraffes in the back are, what does it mean? I mean, we're going to talk about this in class. I want to hear your interpretation. It's like the phones out of the eyes. I mean, just, Got little Vladimir Lenins on the piano keys. It's just whatever. Sully from Monsters Inc. is about to come in the room. Okay, sure. I mean, if you want to. I don't know. I just don't. It's just, and then there's this, and there's like a face here. I mean, was this like a four-eyed baby? I mean, is it? I mean, that's the thing, right? Anxiety. You just don't know, and that's the point. Is that I mean, we just don't know, and we don't know where we're going, and it's all screwy, and life is terrible, and it's just forget it.